This episode is sponsored by my good friend, Ian O'Neill. Hello and welcome back to Film Pro Productivity and Success, the podcast that helps film professionals and other creative people to live a more focused, effective and happy life. My name is Carter Ferguson, I'll be your host today, and this is episode 105, Parkinson'S Law. The purpose of time management and getting more done in less time is to enable you to spend more face time with the people you care about and doing the things that give you the greatest amount of joy in life. Brian Tracy, unquote. I'm revisiting something today that I've mentioned once or twice in the past because I have kind of come to realise that perhaps it's got considerably more productivity value than I think I'd previously conceded it. Parkinson's Law was a statement made by Cyril Northcote Parkinson, a British historian and author, in 1955, and first appeared as the opening line in an article for The Economist, and later becoming the focus of one of Parkinson's books, Parkinson's Law, The Pursuit of Progress. And the law is simply that work expands and contracts to fill the time allotted for its completion. I'll say that one more time. Work expands and contracts to fill the time allotted for its completion. Or that the more time you allocate in advance to a certain task, the longer it will take for you to complete it, even if it could have been completed in less time. So if you give yourself a week to complete a 2-hour task, say, then psychologically speaking, the task will increase in complexity and become more daunting so as to fill that week out. It might not even fill the extra time with more work, in fact, but just stress and tension about having to get it done. And people will often end up unnecessarily stretching out the task as well, procrastinating perhaps, or just doing unnecessarily detailed or refined work so that it will take them the whole week to complete it, if you get what I'm saying. And a student, of course, will often take as long to finish an assignment as they are given, so that regardless of if they're given a week or a month or a whole semester, or possibly even just 3 hours, they will likely finish it right before the deadline. It's that thing where, you've given let's say it was in an exam and they had to write a 1,000 word essay and they were given 3 hours to write it. If that was instead homework and they were given a week to hand this in next week, do you think they'd be writing it in 3 hours that night, or do you think you'd put it off and say, no, I can do that later, and maybe only cram it in at the last moment? And when you decide to work on a project, whether it's a business idea that you want to develop or a script that you want to write, you'll often end up taking significantly longer to get started and to finish those things that you need, especially in situations where you don't have a concrete deadline for finishing a project. And that is one of the big keys to this, is setting yourself a deadline. And I've talked about deadlines in the past, obviously. Just to remind you what we're talking about here, Parkinson's Law is work expands and contracts to fill the time allotted for its completion. Parkinson's Law has been observed in a number of scientific studies which show that when people are given extra time to complete a task, they'll generally take advantage of, as I was saying before, that extra time, even if they don't really need it. And even if it doesn't lead to better performance on the task, the effect sometimes also extends to subsequent attempts to perform the same task as well, which I found interesting, meaning that if someone is given extra time to perform a task the first time around, they will also often take longer than necessary to complete the task again and again in future. And even if you are removing the explicit instructions giving them extra time, they will continue to take that same longer amount of time to do it. And the research also suggests that people often think in terms of how much time do I have to complete it, rather than in terms of how much time do I need to complete it. And it's this mindset that can cause people to waste time needlessly and work in a relatively inefficient manner. Most notably for us, perhaps, is that people often struggle with procrastination, which can cause them to delay working on tasks until right before the deadline, regardless of how much time they've got to complete them, since they just can't bring themselves to get them started earlier. For example, I gave myself, and I'm giving a lot of examples in this, but I'm trying to get the point across. I gave myself a week to complete the last 3 episodes of the show last week, and I took that full week to get them done. But the truth is that although I stressed and I was tired and I thought about and fretted over these episodes quite a lot, I did drag my feet, I think. And in actuality, I completed all 3 shows only on Friday there. And that was largely writing them as well, incidentally. And I suppose that's what's brought me to recording this one today, that realization that Parkinson's law was in effect. And you can judge for yourself, of course, whether the last 3 shows were below par or not. But it was doing those 3 shows that made me think I need to recover Parkinson's law. And here we are today. I struggle generally with the allotment of time for tasks and projects really all the time. And what I decided I need to do, partly from researching this episode, but partly because I just knew I had to do it anyway, is I need to start monitoring how long these tasks that I regularly do take. And with that knowledge, I would be far better able to estimate how long things are going to take. I'm assessing right now in regard to how long the shorter shows take. By the way, I'm assessing how all this works, and certainly it's working out for me, because previously I was sometimes writing 1 episode over maybe 3 days, and yes, there was a bit of Parkinson's law in play there. But the shorter shows, these ones where I'm really just trying to make one point, are coming right down, so it's a kind of reassessment of how long they take. But with the knowledge of how long our tasks can take, we will be able to, or better able to, utilise Parkinson's law, is my point. I was looking for lots of interesting quotes about Parkinson's law, but they really all come down to the same thing, which is the law itself, that work expands and contracts to fill the time allotted for its completion. So I'll just shove that one back in there again. So again, it's hopefully locking in what we're talking about here. But I did find an article in lifehack.org that talked about Parkinson's law, and it said that when implementing the law, to look for those little time fillers like email and feed reading that you might usually think take 10 or 20 or possibly even 30 minutes. These are the cockroaches, it calls them, of the productivity world. Little pests that do nothing but make your life a pain in the backside. Pains that you can't seem to get rid of no matter how much you run around the house with a shoe or bug spray. And it also says that instead of doing the leisurely 20 to 30 minute morning email check, to give yourself just 5 minutes. And if you're up for a challenge, go one better and give yourself just 2 minutes. And if Parkinson's law is in effect, you will still, of course, get it all done. And I can sense already through the microphone that the perfectionists amongst you will be reeling at the thought of all this. But I ask you, perfectionists, to remember the lesson of my perfectionism episode, and that is to accept good enough, which good enough can be a very high standard, as a suitable alternative to the time-consuming and unachievable perfect. Parkinson's law is simply an observation, but it works because you often give tasks far longer than they really need, or sometimes because you want a bit of a time buffer, perhaps. And usually you just have an inflated idea of how long a task takes to complete. But once you get better at judging the time your tasks take, then Parkinson's law will become much more valuable. You can experiment, of course, with Parkinson's law and try squashing your deadlines down to the bare minimum in any area of your life, but just be conscious of the line between bare minimum and not enough time. And what you're aiming at here is a job well done in less time, not a disaster that's going to lose you employment or clients because you've just pushed it too far. Today's call to action is to take a task you usually take an hour to complete, say checking your emails or checking your social media, and setting yourself a time limit to deal with it. If it usually takes you an hour, take 10 minutes. If it usually takes you 30 minutes, try taking 4 or 5 minutes. Because work expands and contracts to fill the time allotted for its completion, that's why we're here, you will still get it done, but you will also have freed up valuable time and energy to put into more important matters instead. On next week's show, I'll be revisiting a very popular episode from last season with another visit from Abo Demi, and the episode's called 3 More Motivational Messages from Abo Demi. Tune in to find out more. And if you have a moment, kind of additional call to action, please, if you've got a moment, please go and Subscribe to the show if you've not already in one of the podcast apps, and leave a review if you can. Reviews are a big help in boosting the show in the rankings on sites like Apple Podcasts, and that in turn helps in attracting new listeners, so I'd be very grateful for it if you would take the time to do so. But I'll end now with the words of Abraham Lincoln, who said, "Leave nothing for tomorrow, which can be done today." Now take control of your own destiny, keep on shooting, and join me next time on Film Pro Productivity and Success. The executive producer on this season is David Richard Thompson, and the music that you're listening to right now is Adventures by Himitsu. You can follow the show on Twitter if you like, at FilmProProdPod, or on Facebook at FilmProProductivity. And there's a full transcript of this episode and every episode only on the official website at FilmProProductivity.com. Please continue to support the show, folks, by subscribing, spreading the word, and leaving an exceptionally awesome review. Thanks.